So it's that time of year again where you're getting out your Christmas lights only to discover that a bunch of your strands, only half of the strand is working, or maybe none of the strand is working. And so it becomes a really frustrating job of getting a new bulb and then checking each one by one, very time consuming and just not a whole lot of fun to deal with. But in this video, I'm gonna show you a super efficient way to find those bad bulbs quickly, get them replaced, get your lights installed so that you're not just spending the entire day swapping out light bulbs. And even though I'm showing you these incandescent Christmas lights, I'm also going to show you how to easily locate your LED Christmas lights, as those are becoming a lot more popular. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so as you can see here, I've got a strand of incandescent Christmas lights, and half the strand is working and the other strand is completely out. Now, as most of you all know, that typically means that we've got one or two bulbs that are bad on this half of the strand. By this half of the strand being completely illuminated, we know that all the bulbs on this half are good. So it just takes one bulb for an entire half of a strand to go out. And some of you might have wondered, how can half the strand work and the other half not work? And to put it as simply as possible is that your Christmas light strands have more than just one circuit. They typically have two circuits on them. So I'll show you really quickly what I mean by that. So if we go to the very beginning of the strand of lights where it's plugged in, you will see that we have two wires. There's just two wires. You got a neutral and you've got a hot wire, depending on how this is plugged in. These two different wires can alternate which one is hot and which one is neutral. And that's because these plugs are not polarized. You can put them in like this, or you can flip them upside down and put them in and they'll work regardless. But here at the beginning, we just have the two wires. But if we go to the very first light bulb in this strand, you will see all of a sudden we have more than just the two wires. Here's the two wires over here, but then you have an additional wire coming out of that first light bulb. And that's because since we have two different circuits, depending on which way it's plugged in, the power is being fed. It's either gonna be fed on this wire or this one. But if it's being fed on this lower one is going to the second circuit, which is the second half of the light strand. And so you would need a return wire or a neutral in order to bring the power back this way if the plug was flipped. So this is what is called a junction. Whereas when we go to the second light on the strand, you will see there are just two wires coming out of there. And that is for the line and then the load, which then is taking the current on down the line. But you still have, instead of just one wire down here at the bottom, you have two. One is going to be the neutral, and then one is going to be a return path for the current. Similarly, if we go to the first light in the second half of this strand, you will see we are back to having three wires going into that first light. And so it's the same thing. So I just wanted you all to kind of understand how these work, because I think it's gonna really help with troubleshooting and making sense of how we find that bad bulb. Alrighty, so now that we've got that out of the way, how do we figure out which one of these bulbs is bad very quickly? Well, the secret to doing that is by using a non-contact voltage detector like this. Now, these are both made by Klein. They're two different models. This is a lesser expensive one that just senses one voltage, whereas this one over here, it has multiple functions on it. I actually prefer this one because not only do you have the 70 to 1000 volt setting, but you also can move it to 12 to 1000 volts, and you can make it a little bit more sensitive in finding those weaker signals. So that can come in handy sometimes. As you can see, both the lights are green. That means it's not detecting any voltage. However, once it senses voltage, you'll see it turns to red, and it's also making an audible sound, letting us know that there is voltage present there. Now, some of you might be familiar with these. These are guns that are supposed to fix your light bulbs. But one of the things that they advertise that makes these so great is that you're able to push a button, go along your lights, and figure out which bulb is bad. These are using some of the same technology as these. This is basically a non-contact voltage detector built in to the Lightkeeper Pro. Now this one's for incandescent bulbs, but they also make one for LEDs. In my opinion, it's just better to figure out which bulb is actually bad and get it replaced, and it'll fix everything. And of course, like always, I'll have links for everything you see in this video, from the non-contact voltage detectors to the Christmas lights to the Lightkeeper Pros. I'll have links for everything down in the description down below. When you click on those links, it'll take you directly to whatever you clicked on, so you can check them all out for yourself. All right, so now that we understand all that, back to figuring out which one of these bulbs is bad. So let's start with what we know is good. As you can see, these lights are all on. I'll show you exactly how this works. And we also need to know which way the power is being fed on this to know which direction we need to be working in. So again, this is the beginning of the strand. One thing we always want to do when using these non-contact voltage detectors is we want to make sure that we isolate whatever it is that we're testing. So in this case, since I know that one of these is going to be hot and one's going to be neutral, I want to pull that second wire down. So it's down here at the bottom, and then use my hand to kind of block that signal, because what these are actually sensing is the electromagnetic field and not the actual voltage. So as long as we isolate these from each other, we can kind of block that signal and make sure that we're getting a correct reading. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that my power is being fed in this direction into this bulb. And as you can see, when I put my voltage detector up to this wire, this is not the feed wire. This is acting as the neutral. Whereas if I go down to this bottom second wire that I pulled out, you'll see this is the hot wire. Well, what I want to do in that case, because I want it to be going in one direction, is I'll take my plug, pull it out, flip it to the opposite direction or upside down. Now when I go back and isolate my wires, checking the bottom one first that was hot, as you can see, we no longer have voltage there. But if we go up here, as you can see, that's where the voltage is. So now we've got the current flowing in the proper direction, so we know which way to work. All right, so now we want to figure out which one of the bulbs are bad in our second half. Now, something to keep in mind is since it's in the second half of it, the way that the power is being fed, this first bulb, it has the current feeding directly into this first bulb, and this is the neutral. Well, if that's the case on the first half, it would actually be the opposite on the second half, and instead of the power continuing to be fed into this bulb from that first half, it's actually going on this line down here and then feeding back from the opposite direction. So I'll just show you that really quickly. As you can see, I've got no voltage, or any of these wires for that matter, which means it's not being fed from that direction. It's on this bottom wire again. So what do we need to do? Well, we can either start with the last light on this strand and work backwards, or to just make things easier mentally and just always make sure that your first light is the one being fed, all we have to do then is take that plug and then flip it in the opposite direction. And what that's going to do now is this is going to be the feed wire, and this bottom one now becomes the neutral. So now we can work in the proper direction. So let's go ahead, put this up in there. As you can see, we've got voltage. So we know that this bulb is good. In order to save time and not go bulb by bulb, I always recommend doing it in chunks. Here's our bulb. Let's go down the strand about halfway to the end of the second half. So like right in here, let's isolate that bulb right there. Check it. We've got voltage on both sides. So we know that's good. So even though we've gone halfway, what I'm going to do then is from this distance to the end, find another halfway point. And then we're going to go ahead and check this bulb. And we have no voltage here. So now we know that our problem is somewhere in between this bulb that we checked and this bulb. So it's somewhere in here. So then what I would do is I would just go into the middle of this chunk and start from here and check. We got voltage. Now I'm going to go one by one because now I've narrowed it down by quite a lot. Voltage there. Voltage there. Something else you can do on these incandescent bulbs, it won't work on the LEDs, is instead of just isolating it completely and checking underneath of it, you can actually check up at the bulb as well because there's a connection inside of these incandescent bulbs. So we'll just go one by one until we find that bad bulb. And we're getting nothing here. If we go to the one before it, we've got power. If we get to this one, now something we can do to kind of verify is we can separate it out. We're going to check each side of this. So we're going to check this side, which should be the feed. And sure enough, we've got voltage there. But if we check this one over here, the outgoing, no voltage. Voltage on the incoming, none on the outgoing. So that's pretty much guaranteeing us that this is our bad bulb. So of course, all we need to do then is pull that bulb out, put a new bulb in, and just like that, our entire strand is up and working again. All right, so now let's move on to LED lights. And as you can see, the beginning half of my strand is working and the second half is not. Now, these do differ in some ways from the incandescent bulbs as to how you can test them. They're a little bit more finicky, but I'll show you how I do it really quickly. But again, let's go to the beginning of our strand here, starting with this first bulb. Let's separate all the wires out so we can figure out which way this is being fed. All right, so now that I've got that bulb isolated, I got that lower wire down at the bottom again, got my 3 wires coming into the bulb. As we can see, the power is being fed in this direction into this first bulb, as the neutral is in fact neutral. But again, just like our incandescent bulbs, our bad bulb is in the second half of this strand, so we actually do want for this lower wire to be our feed wire, so that on the first bulb on the second half, it's being fed in the same direction as this one. Otherwise, the power is going to be being fed on the second half from the very end of the strand. So again, all we need to do is unplug our lights, take the plug, flip it over to the opposite direction, plug it in. Now the lower wire is our feed wire, and it's no longer being fed on this wire. So then when we go to our first bulb on the second half, if we separate this out, this wire down at the bottom should not be hot, and it should be being fed on this wire right here, which it is. Bottom wire, nothing there. So we've got our power flowing in the proper direction to be working towards the end. All right, so the way that I do this with LEDs is kind of the same thing, but a little bit different. You will not be able to test this part of the bulb as there's no filament in these. You can test at the very base of it right there. That is where the actual bulb is. And as you can see, I'm getting a reading there. But what I like to do with these LEDs is I just take my non-contact voltage detector and I just put it into the base. All right, so I know I've got power going there, so to save time, let's do the same thing. Let's go to about halfway of this second half of the strand. Just pick a starting point and check underneath. Put it up into the base. We had a little bit of voltage there. With these LEDs, this is where I do like this one a little bit better, because now I can switch it from 70 as the minimum voltage to 12 as the minimum voltage, and then see what it shows. So it's showing that it's picking up voltage there, but it is below 70 volts. Every once in a while it gives us a clear signal like that. You really have to get it up in there nice and tight to the base of that light. So I believe I still have voltage there. So now I'll go a little bit further down the line, isolate this bulb out. And as you can see, it's showing that it's picking up some lower voltage. There's a clear signal. So we have voltage there. Now, since I'm so close to the end, I'm gonna go one by one. So I'll put it up into the base there, showing that I'm getting some voltage there. Every once in a while, a little bit more of a clear signal. So let's move on to the next one. Put it up in there. And as you can see, I'm getting no voltage whatsoever, not even low voltage. If I'm not getting voltage here, but I did have some here, that would tell me that the bulb that is actually bad is the one before it. Because if the one before it was good, we would still have voltage on one of these wires and we'd be picking it up, and we're picking up nothing. So what that probably means is on the bulb before it, we've got voltage on this wire, but none on this one. Voltage on the incoming, none whatsoever, not even low voltage on the outgoing. So that tells me this is my bad bulb. Again, all I need to do, pull that bulb out, get a new bulb, put it in, and just like that, just like with the incandescent bulbs, now the entire strand is working again. And a lot of people think that since they got LED bulbs, they don't burn out. And for the most part, it does take a very long time for these to burn out. What I have found on my strands where I have half that is out and I've got a bad bulb, it's not the actual bulb that burned out. Almost every single time, if you pull the bad bulb out and you look at it, you will see on this side, I've got this little wire down here. So I've got it there, but if I flip it over to the other side, I don't know what it is with LED bulbs, but a lot of times on the bad bulbs, the other side won't have a wire on it or a line in order to pass the power along. But regardless of the reason that the bulb is no longer working, as you saw, this is incredibly easy to do, and you're not gonna find a faster way in order to locate those bad bulbs. But using these makes this whole process a lot more manageable, less frustrating, and will save you a ton of time. But like I mentioned earlier, like always, for your convenience, I'll have links for everything you saw in this video, from the different kinds of lights, whether it's LED or incandescent, to the different non-contact voltage detectors. And also you can check out the Lightkeeper Pro to see how exactly those work. I'll have links for everything down in the description down below. So when you click on those links, it will take you directly to whatever you clicked on, so you can check it all out for yourself. Now, really quickly before you go, if you found value in this video, then you'll definitely find value in another Christmas video that I did, where I show how to make outdoor Christmas trees using nothing but lights and a pole. If that would be of interest to you, all you have to do is click on this video right over here and it'll take you directly to it. But hopefully you found value in this video, and if you did, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button right down below. And of course, if you have any questions or comments still, you can leave those down in the comment section. And I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.